This is the ArtWorks Alliance podcast. ArtWorks Alliance promotes better participatory arts, encompassing all art forms, ways of working, settings, and art purposes. Find out more at artworksalliance.uk. Hello, welcome to the ArtWorks Alliance podcast. I'm Rob Watson, and joining me today is David Richmond, who is kind of the power or the brains, I don't know how you like to be described in these circumstances, behind Arts in Development. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thanks, Rob. Yes, thanks for having me on. It's good to have a chance to kind of chat things through.
Yeah, and the idea of these conversations really is to profile members and supporters of the ArtWorks Alliance, because we're a community of practice and we want to share the insight and the experience and the tribulations and the challenges and the way we overcome those things through our network. And really one of the best ways to do that is to just sit and have a chat and kind of, there's no real plan for a conversation like this other than who are you and how did you get into what you're doing? So do you want to start off by just giving us a kind of brief overview of you?
An overview of me. Okay. Well, I'm David Richmond. And I have worked with people all my life, I suppose, 40 years of working with people. I've for many years ran a small arts-based, perhaps a fairly typical AWA kind of organisation, an arts-based community benefit society in Bristol. And then for the last few years, I've been supporting more individual artists and also thinking about my own practice and thinking about very much about what I've learned through my years of supporting other people to be amazing and creative. And how I can bring that together and bring that out to share with other people, how my experience can be useful for me, I suppose. And that's really what Arts and Development is about. That makes sense.
And you've got a unique way of doing this, haven't you? So describe how you go about this.
Well, it's focused very much on the idea of walking. Yeah. So I focus very much on walking, and particularly on the moments that we experience when we go for a walk. So it's about collecting, processing, organising moments of human experience. That makes sense. And so I suppose the kind of core is having thought all my life about how I could be useful. Maybe I don't fit into maybe some of those boxes. I've always had a kind of social justice kind of, how do you make a difference in the world? But I'm not a member of any kind of oppressed group in any way, shape or form. So I've always kind of found that helping people doesn't necessarily help. What's my role? Trying to discover what my role is, discover how we can support people. So what I think I've come to over the times is that actually what support people need is really very simple, and sometimes what we need, and sometimes perhaps all we need, is just someone to walk alongside you. So that's, I think, is probably the core of what I do, is I walk alongside people. Yeah.
What difference does that make, that walking alongside people? So people come to you because they've got a particular need, or is it just this development idea? I want to get into what you think, what you mean by development. So do you, where are you starting from with people generally? And what's the process that you then need, that walking alongside them? What does that involve?
So there's a few questions there. So I think the first thing, say what's different, I think walking alongside is a very big difference to kind of any kind of formal situation. If I want to help you, if I've already set myself up as an expert, and I've already said there's something wrong with you because you need my help. Now, I don't think that actually does help. So I suppose over the years of working with people, I find it's very much easier, much easier to create a dependency than it is to foster capability with people. So walking alongside is really key, kind of metaphorically to me. We're all on this journey, right? And it's very much about that. So I don't when I come to walk with people, I don't come as any kind of expert. I think it's in a sense it's kind of counterintuitive, but I am just Dave. I'm not a therapist or a counsellor or an expert, or because not that those things don't have value, they do. But in the kind of circumstance I do, I'm just somebody else who's walking on the journey, trying to make sense of life too. So there's something really fundamental that kind of shifts in that, and taking things outside shifts in that, makes that shift in a huge way. It just makes, it brings that into a kind of real physical thing. I suppose that's quite a lot of what it's about. So I think I might have answered one of your questions. There were probably three more, but I'm not good at remembering the others.
I'm not very good at asking simple questions. It's I chop and change in the same sentence. One of the things I thought there's a map behind you, and I don't know where it's from, but I don't know if it's Bristol or the area surrounding it. And I read a biography last year of Coleridge and Wordsworth. Mm-hmm. And they did a lot of walking. Is there a tradition that you draw on that? Do you see this as part of a tradition, or is it, there's a intellectual, philosophical, literary tradition of, Beethoven composed while he was walking. And so is this something that you see as something we need to rediscover, or is it something that you just do naturally yourself, or do you feel as if have you been schooled in this, or where did it come from, the idea?
Yes to all of those except perhaps the schooled one. It's Somerset behind me. That's where I was brought up and born. And interestingly enough, I was searching the Coleridge Trail yesterday and see whether I can walk that with me back in summer. So there's very much there. Oh yes, there's a huge tradition. There's a huge tradition for a reason, because again, as you say, it's a natural process. And one of the things I believe very passionately is we've kind of lost touch with some really natural process about what it is to be human. Something else you said there that kind of intimated that's not there, but it's a natural process. And yes, so absolutely, my two draw on heroes of Thoreau, I went out into the woods because I wanted to live deliberately. That's really important to me. And really key again, and not to discover at the end of my time that I had not lived, so there's a real thoughtfulness to it. There's a massive, it's fascinating, isn't it? Reading about people that have, yes, even Nietzsche, slightly misquoted, but don't believe an idea that hasn't been fostered in the outside air. All of those kind of. There's a massive amount that you can draw on from that, but it's mostly getting in touch with that. And I suppose going back a bit to my story, which has been I've never been an ambitious kind of person in any shape. I love people, or I love seeing people thrive and prosper. So I've spent my life being very privileged to kind of walk alongside and support lots of other people to do that. And I suppose I can't walk alongside unless I'm kind of in the game too. If I'm not in the game, I don't have my own creative practice, then what am I doing? I'm saying it's good for you and not good for me. You have to, have some skin in the game, I suppose. So Walks in Development is, again, about me getting closer to having spent all my life saying, yes, you can be you, saying, well, what is it about me? What's the me thing? And the most me thing, if I think back to growing up in Somerset behind me, is getting out and being able. That's when I feel like I'm Dave, and that's when I feel connected to the world, and in a really interesting way that is connected with other people, because it's sometimes these things sound counterintuitive, and you step out into the world in order to understand people, in order to engage with stuff. When I walk, and the walks I've done with people, one of the first things to kind of learn is just how much this is an engaged practice. This is not let's get away from all our problems for a bit. And no, let's engage with our problems by taking them out into the world and seeing them in a broader perspective. So,
It was interesting that because it was a question that kind of popped up in my thinking was about a therapeutic practice, and there's different. We have a particular, maybe a stereotypical view of modern therapy is very much, kind of, it's a passive activity, it's reflexive, it's about your emotions, and it lacks. I was listening to a podcast with James Hillman, the psychologist, and he was saying, it's become too passive, and it's become too much about the person and the self. And actually, he was relating stories about Carl Jung, who I'm a big fan of. Was it was an active process, and it was a directed process. You need to go here. You need to deal with these obstacles. There are challenges along the way. You have to be prepared for the journey. If you've not got the right footwear, if you've not got the right clothing, and the British weather is so changeable within the same few hours, that you can really, and that kind of has a resonance with a sense of, I think, a kind of therapeutic approach, which is focused on the activity rather than focused on the person thinking about themselves abstractly, which is what a lot of modern therapy encourages people to. Well-being, meditation is about doing nothing. And I find when I'm out, it's when I go for a walk, I do get into that flow state. Of your conscious guard drops, and you're allowing your unconscious thoughts to come forward, rather than it just being about the transactions of thinking that you normally step through. So, what do you have something? Do you have like a big question, I suppose, is a philosophy? I mean, I suppose you're hinting at it really, because you've mentioned Nietzsche and the Romantic poets. And is there a philosophy there that you think guides you? It's something that you hold on to.
Yeah, yes, I suppose. Interesting enough, one of the moments when I talk about this is all about collecting moments. One of the moments when I share when I'm introducing this with people that's really key to me was thinking quite a few years ago of reading, probably was it here? There we are. Might as well. Bit of Gramsci. Yeah. Yeah. And so you pick on that thing. There's a beautiful thing there he says where, talks about philosophy, and he says, we're all philosophers. Yeah. You can't not actually have a philosophy. It's impossible not to have a philosophy. Yeah. Language itself has a philosophy. So the only question really that he poses is whether that philosophy is one that's foisted on us from outside, by outside forces. And he's writing 100 years ago, way before social media or any of that kind of things, and Facebook and X and all of that. But whether you want to, as he puts it, be your own guide, as you say, take an active part in the creation of the history of the world. Yeah. So there's very much philosophy behind it, but part of that philosophy is about shaping your own philosophy. It's about being your own guide on the way. So for me, it is about kind of, yes. So, I mean, I talk about that because that's me thinking when I've always been one who can chat away. But if you push me, say, what's my philosophy? Would I be able to say what it was? It made me think about that. So arts and development's kind of come out of that, saying, no, you've got to nail this, Dave. You've got to be able to say what it is. So I've been on that journey, and obviously will always be on that journey, because that's what being in development is about. But if I wanted, and I do want to try and describe that, I would say that in development is a three-dimensional worldview, if that makes sense, right? And so going back, for example, to what you've just said about, for example, about personal development, and therapy, it's all about me, but not about the action, right? Is, to me, we have had a tendency to separate things into packages that we don't see the connections. So to me, who I am, my personal development is inextricably connected to how I relate to other people. It's inextricably connected to the outside world, right? So we can't, those things are, everything I do affects who I am, and it affects how I relate to other people, and it affects the wider world, and vice versa. So the problem I have with those kind of more personal development, if you like, is that it's actually meaningless and possibly even unhelpful unless it is also collective development, unless it's also community development. Those three things are entangled. So to me, we experience life in a three-dimensional world. So arts and development and philosophy, it's about trying to bring those three things into alignment, into finding the harmony. And the idea of a walk is very much that's what happens naturally when we go for a walk. If I'm not just going to the shop to buy a pint of milk and got back, yes, I succeeded. I'm going, a walk has a beginning and middle and an end. And I started off obviously thinking about walking and how walking helps us, and this happens and that happens and so on. And I do very much talk about three phases of a walk being a three-dimensional experience. But the joy of it is that this is what happens anyway. Yeah. So that if you like talking about those three phases, as we walk outside in that first phase, we have that kind of opening up, as you talked about, that kind of a subconscious starts kicking in and we start noticing something new, whether it's cloud formation that I can see out of my window, which is amazing at the moment, or whatever it might be. There's a kind of opening up and the flow of creativity and so on that you talked about. And then we kind of, after a while though, we want to, that we get a bit frustrated. We want to start getting to that making bit, don't we? Want to do something with that. Yeah, all these ideas, yeah, great, but what does it mean? What's it in practice? So naturally we start then talking then about kind of the physically, how do we do that? So, or that's true in general. What does it mean for me, or what does it mean in this situation? That kind of happens. And you work through that a bit. And then as you start to come back, the final phase, you get back to, or start to get back to where I started. You go, right, but I need something from this. How am I going to take this forward? And you get into that really planning and active, right, I'm going to, how I bring this back into the world. Yeah. And then, so you get back, and then but by the end, you can kind of summarize that experience and you create your next steps, and there we go. And it's kind of happened, And I love that because if you like, as a facilitator for 4 years, I don't really have to do much facilitating. I just get to walk alongside and listen and experience, A, how amazing this world is, and B, how amazing people are that we walk alongside.
Do you find there's a difference in the way that people experience this? And a thing that comes to mind is the difference between introverted people and extroverted people in a very general sense. Is that part of the assessment? Because typically, probably being stereotypical, but being an introvert myself, it's kind of the world can be overwhelming. It takes me some time. I don't just throw myself in. I'm not my extrovert friends who just they launch themselves into things and I like to scope things out first, a bit more cautious, make sure I know where I'm going, and have a plan in mind of where I'm going. Whereas a lot of extroverted people will probably just kind of say, great, let's just embrace the environment and see what we discover along the way. Do you have to what do you process that? Is that something that you're mindful of when you're starting off with somebody? I'm intrigued about how people go through that process with you.
It was quite interesting, I suppose, in a way. The answer probably from my point of view would be I know if there was. Because, but it's for me, it's about finding what that person is to me. If you like, again, the thing about walking, which is, again, even if we can walk this, even if you're sitting in your front room looking out the window, but we all have a walking practice. We all have a creative practice. To me, it's about discovering what that is. Yeah, and a lot about this is about, like I say, getting us back in touch with what is happening naturally for us. So for me, individually walking alongside it, it's this journey of finding out who this person is and allowing them to be it. But it's not that I've got this bag of tricks of solutions from all this training I've had or whatever. It's just I'm a guy walking, I'm interested in them and the path. So it's reconnecting with who we are anyway. Yeah, I don't think that people need to be taught stuff necessarily. I think what people need is reassurance that they actually are on the path, that we know how to do stuff that people might come out with. I mean, it's kind of bizarre what people might, I don't know, I always tell stories. Someone said, I've got a decision to make, Dave. Can you help me make a decision? Well, no, but I can go for a walk with you, And kind of when we came on that walk to talk about that decision, so he just looked at me and said, well, I'm going to do it, Dave, because that's who I am, but you knew that, didn't you? And it's kind of, well, yes, so did you, but you needed to go through the walk to be able to know it. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, people don't need solutions from some magician who plucks things out of the hat. They just need the time and the space to go through that process, because they will recognize what the response is. When they see it, you'll recognize it, and you have at your hands these natural processes that enable you to do things. So the walking is a process, and we're also looking now particularly at kind of some physical tools that give that a kind of physical reality and a sense to it. But you've got all you need to be extraordinary. You don't really need me, but it's lovely to be able to create that space for you to realise that. Is that making any sense?
It's central to the participatory ethos, I think, isn't it? That what we try and do as facilitators is to minimise the need for permission giving. And I've talked about this with some other colleagues, where you talk about the idea of I don't give anybody permission at all to do anything. I'm not that kind of person. It's but somebody turned around to me and said, no, you inspire them. And that made me feel very more uncomfortable again, because the idea of inspiring people is like, and then you kind of think about it and you think, actually, maybe, I mean, in a looser sense of what we mean by inspire, I think the phrase inspiring people has got locked up with a lot of social affirmation and social status, rather than what you're describing, which is inspiration that is that element of coming from the intuition, and being able to reconcile something which your logical brain says you must do this, but that part of yourself that you can't really define, because that's typically why people are in need of development, because there's a conflict between what they think they ought to do and what they really want to do, but the two are often separated. And what your process is describing to me is a kind of sense that just kind of, keep going with the thinking, but at the same time you then start to listen to those other forces or voices within yourself that you kind of start to recognize, and that the intuition and the walk facilitates that, because it takes your mind off the day-to-day, paying the bills, meeting the goals, the behavioural type stuff that is so dominant. Whereas this is more about then saying, step back, anticipate where you are in the world, where if you've chosen a nice, pleasant walk, but also thinking about yourself and grounding yourself within that place. And that inspiration is that element of, the font of, I've got it now. As you said, you suddenly realise you click and you make that connection, and you kind of said, this is what I need to do. So you just created the space for somebody to do that. You've cleared the pathway for them, but they're walking the pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you talked a lot of things there. I wanted to pick up. What did I want to pick up on particularly? When they're walking with artists in particular, there are a lot of, initially, you notice a lot of people struggle to kind of justify what it is we're doing, or articulate what we're doing, or we feel that it's not valued enough, that it's not recognised enough, and well, I would meet people who have this amazing practice. I mean, I suppose a bit even what we've been talking about, the mission things and so on. They're quite difficult to kind of nail down and say, this is it. It's a craft and a skill that's in there. So people have it's not quite an imposter syndrome, is it? But it's kind of a lack of self-respect and validation. So it's just interesting you talk about history and poets and that, thinking about I've just started and always try new ways of describing what I do. When I describing walks in development as a guide to the path less travelled. Yeah. So picking up on the old Robert Frost poem, about a path not taken, in which he says, two paths diverged in the woods, and I took the path less travelled by, and that's what makes the difference. So that's what has made all the difference. So to me, I think this is about, I try to think who's this for, and it's not for people I've always struggled when people come to the marketing stuff and say, what's your segment of society that this is for? Now, it's for people that are in development, that recognise that we're on the journey. And maybe it's for people who've chosen not to take that main path, which is well trodden and well understood about how to get fame and glory and riches and so on. It's about trying to find another path. So there are lots of really strong reasons why people feel anxious and unvalidated and difficult to quantify what we do, etc. And they come back to that kind of core. So what I think, again, the core bit about is recognize all these people are recognize we're all walking these different paths, but we're walking parallel paths. Yeah. To me, we're all in development, we're all walking parallel paths, and we're asking different questions, asking the same questions along the way. So looking at how that all comes together. Yeah, that to me, someone said to me recently, and it's really stuck, is we really shouldn't be doing this alone. It makes no sense. In some ways we're working our own path, but there are so many of us that are walking, trying to find another route through life that have said, no, actually that isn't for me. And yes, we obviously still have to find a way to feed ourselves and do the best by the people around us and so on. But we've chosen this path and how to do it. And we're all there's so much we've got in common about how to do that surely we can find ways of recognising what we have in common and walking alongside each other is a metaphor and an opening for that kind of process to happen.
There's a thought that comes to mind, and forgive me if this is like, you don't have to answer it, but there's a sense of this which is it's a spiritual activity or a spiritual journey, and I mean that in a secular way. I suppose I don't know if you have a faith or I'm not particularly fussed either way. And the people that you work with, in the same way, but because we've become a very materialistic society, and the dominance is on possessions and material status and things like that. It's that escape from that, and as you say, the fund and cycles and the way that you have to report and evaluate is all very much things like outcome driven reports and demographics for target communities that you're working with, all this kind of stuff, which actually is not really related to what the creative practice for many artists, I'm not saying all, but for many artists is about. How do you find when you're working with people that, is it like relief to suddenly go, I can put all of that aside?
Sorry, jump in. Well, I don't think we are putting aside. That's what I say about it being engaged. We've got to find a way to navigate that, right? If I talk again about development as a three-dimensional worldview, then it's not a linear and it's not binary. So it's very easy to say there's a quantity-quality thing. I mean, maybe push it for me, but I think of three-dimensional, I think there are quality, there's a physical world that's here, but I can't, that physical world, I can only access that by my experience, by my subjective experience. They're connected. So to me, I can't extract the physical thing from the qualitative experience or from, the third dimension in my senses would be the passage of time. That's how we experience stuff. So to me, that's how I see the kind of, if you like, at a real fundamental level. So you can't just say, let's go qualitative and forget the quantity and let's do that the other way. But yes, obviously, there is a huge amount of that kind of qualitative realm if you like, that subjective realm is completely undermined. It's been lost sight of for lots of very strong reasons. It's much easier, obviously, for capitalism to quantify and commodify things, and for science to measure and be objective and so on. There's lots of reasons why we've gone that way, but we have somehow lost this realm of this qualitative realm. And I think, so yes, like everybody probably in the network, when we talk about outcomes and so on, our hackles go up. And my hackles go up whenever the Arts Council tell us, produce a new report saying just how many jobs we've created and how much money this industry produces, because that's not what the arts is here for. Fundamentally, the arts getting back is about the quality of our lives. It's the quality of the communities, the quality of experience that we have. And really, that's what we should do. That's what nothing else can do for us, apart from creativity, is get us into that realm. What artists do by walking these less travelled paths is so important for society as a whole that we really, really should focus on that. So, and just jumping back on the outcomes bit, maybe as part of the story. Well, I think, if we evaluated a project, I used to run this organisation, we'd have hundreds of different projects going. And one of the things really struck me all the time is we would say those outcomes, we put on an event or an exhibition or whatever. So, it was brilliant, so many hundred people came, or we sold so much paintings. And you start doing that, but before very long, people will say, yeah, but you know what was amazing was that moment when Fred came up and talked to Julie that they'd never done. And did you see the way that so-and-so talked about their art in front of that guy who come in? Did you see that moment when they first started? Right. So that's actually what we do, right? Right. So I did, we had a very big project. We used all sorts of different art forms and things. I brought a whole team together. So what did we actually achieve with this? Right? We're getting all these numbers and all that nonsense. And we looked at those, and we looked at the little moments, if you like, the kind of building blocks that were that. And they're massive. We look at things like quality and creativity and sense of identity and critical thinking and all sorts of things. So I think we completely lose sight of that. This idea that these moments, these qualitative experiences, what life is, and they are, to me, what this exercise was about. So, well, why can't we put those front and centre? Why can't we say what we do is we produce, or we create the space where those moments are more likely to happen than they would otherwise? Yeah, which is just about as directional as you can get, And can't we say that we're all on that journey in some way, one way or another? What we are doing is, I think going back to that Gramsci quote, we whether we like it or not, we are being flooded every moment. To me, every moment is an extraordinary experience. Being alive is just the most amazing thing. And we work in an organisation like those at AWS. I used to say in that organisation, something amazing happens every day. And it did. And I was probably being glib because it's probably every hour, and you can't. But those moments of kind of the real call to it. So really, really was to put those kind of things front and center, saying this is what we're about. I lost my thread of thought.
No, it resonates on so many ways, and so many other conversations that we have about these things. Without being nostalgic, do you think we used to do this kind of stuff better in the past? And the reason I ask that is because clearly a general election has just been called as we're recording this, and it might just be more of the same in terms of managerialism, the creative industries, the devaluation of creative courses and access to these things, and or there might be a renaissance of a re-embracing of that kind of. I'm thinking kind of largely the post Second World War cultural democracy movement that I suppose I grew out of. Maybe the latter stages of that kind of 70s and 80s, which has kind of dissipated now. And we're seeing reports about, the class basis, the class structure of art is very, very, it excludes working class people, massively, as well as, issues about race and identity, that kind of thing. But what can we learn from, when you first started out doing this stuff, what drew you into it, and what do you think we can revisit to re-embrace, or what do we need to relearn and move on from?
Well, I think we should always. I'm always reaching back. Yeah, I think absolutely we should. Yeah. So, it's very much from a similar tradition. I can remember, kind of a few years ago now, I got asked to talk about this to a local arts council team, and one of the arts council officers said to me, "Yeah, but Dave, isn't that just old-fashioned arts development?" I'm like, "Yes, it's, you can remember it too." Yeah, I don't. I absolutely think there's nothing new under the sun. I really don't want this to be. I don't want arts and development to be yet another thing, right? I don't. There's another fade, another thing. It's just it's accessing what was there, accessing this, as you say, right at the start, this rich tradition of what exists. So yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to know when there were music development agencies and dance development agencies and local community development, and people understood what it meant to be in development. Now people think it's, I don't know, about building hospitals or big buildings or something. It's like most things being commodified. But I think a lot of this, to me, part of this journey is about reclaiming that language. Yeah, I'm very happy to claim the language of what it is. To me, it's in development. It's been in that journey as well. And like I say, we're all in development. I'm really interested in how we can bring together all the people in development, but also how the organisations in development and communities and collectives in development. Because again, it's exactly the same process. It's crazy to think that an organisation, what happens, an organisation creates dependency. If it becomes institutional, etc. That's the same thing happens at a personal level. We can see it bigger at the collective level, but it happens there. So yeah, absolutely, it's about drawing on stuff that's been passed by. Why not? We've got these thousands of years and these massive cultural stuff to draw on. They don't have to be commodified and be new to be important. So yes, it's about helping you get back in touch with what we know to feel right, to be right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of shaken off the disposability because without being too using too many big words, the postmodern era, kind of the Campbell soup cans with Warhol is kind of emblematic of that kind of disposability of culture. And it kind of I remember there's a guy, Russell Ackoff, who he was the guy who inspired Sachin Sachi in the late 70s and 80s and about the marketing techniques, and he described the Mona Lisa as a Viennese, I think an Italian housewife, and Mozart as a funny little Viennese guy or something like that, and it's like completely debases the whole sense of cultural value, and in a way that process of actually of rediscovery of what cultural value is probably has to come from within rather than without. So you indicated at this before earlier of kind of how people reaffirm or have some self-confidence about what they're doing. And it's like, you're right, it's not about giving them permission. It's not about externally inspiring them to do something like role models and things, like emulate a role model that's taught in our schools, which I kind of detest. I think it's a terrible thing to do. And talking about things like character as opposed to talking about identity is a different model of, and you discover that when you're out on a walk, because especially if you've got rid of all of the phones and devices and you've switched things off and it's just you and a friend, there's a great quote from, I love Marie-Louise von France, and she says the hardest question to ask anybody is, what do you think?
Cool.
And that sticks with me, because just that whole sense of kind of, well, as according to Gramsci, as according to Coleridge, no, but what do you think?
Yeah.
And that process of taking off the layers of varnish, the social varnish, and discovering actually there's something underneath which is of value within the person, and that creative activity gives you confidence, I suppose. Maybe I'm more romantic than I give the impression of.
Well, yeah, I want to take you back to you probably couldn't be more romantic than me on that one, but back to the sustainability thing. Yeah, because that's, again, talking about a driver, that's a big driver for me. You're talking about, again, the disposability. And I think about that, the project cycles for some. So again, very much arts and development is about how do we create something that, how do we create, if you like, first things I would say, sustainable social change. Yeah. One of the things I would say quite a lot is it's not just plastics that we dispose of. Yeah. And there's so much short-term thinking in what we do, the whole essence of a project. It is really key. I mean, going back, that kind of in trying to, with this organisation that I had, which was about trying to, how art can empower people. That's kind of like in the very name of what it was about. And people went on this amazing journey, but it's very difficult. You create a space for people, and then, well, where's the next step for them? And a space for them to go on. Yeah, we need space for, and then we need to do that for music, and the same for everything else. And so, if you were a delivery organisation, you'd have to deliver this whole ecology. But it is an ecology and a relationship. So you can't deliver change. Yeah. So how do we make it? What makes it sustainable? Yeah. So I think that there has to be a real core there. There has to be a drive there that as workers, or I'm sure all the workers in the network will recognise that they are to some degree burdening themselves, that we can't just keep giving and giving of ourselves without things really achieving. Yeah. And for the people that we work with, I'm very aware that a lot of what I was doing in those days is raising people's expectations. Oh, let's create another big project, and then that project ends and I've got to go and grasp and find something else to keep it going because I can't sustain those expectations, So, well, how much was that really lasting? And it's surely, the funders as well must be fed up of just pumping into new ideas because nothing is really changing. So how do you make something sustainable? To me, it has to have meaning at a personal level to people. We have to be, again, have skin in the game. The people we're working with have to be. I can't evaluate what you're doing in participatory arts if I start evaluating how I've affected you when I ask you. I've created that power balance straight away. It has to be, you share it because it's of meaning to you. You have to be engaged. And again, we have to be walking alongside that together. So we have to find ways that we are all really actively involved in that. So something is sustainable if it has meaning in my life, if I can recognise that meaning, I can take that on and see it. And we have to engage people at that fundamental level. And a lot of this work has been, again, works as a process, but also looking for tools that help us do what we're doing anyway. I think that might have been the thread that I was looking for earlier that I lost, when this, we are bombarded with experiences, with moments that are happening for us. Right? And what we do as people is we choose from all these moments, from all those experiences, which ones we're going to notice, which ones we're going to think of as important, and which ones, how we're going to respond to that. So we can't control what happens to us, but we can control our response. And what we are constantly doing as people is shaping all those experiences. We're constantly shaping and navigating and putting those together. So this is why I focus on these kind of moments bit. It's this little moment that happened because they're the kind of, they're the result of what we're trying to achieve, but they're the building blocks along the way. And what we do in this process is to start collecting these moments and then start from that, a kind of picture starts here. We start mapping them out and seeing connections with them. And we can put those, by looking at these moments, we can create our own narrative. And perhaps more importantly, we can change our narrative. Yeah. I'm quite skeptical of story in a way because they can create dependency. One of the first walks, my friend Stephen did a fantastic help with that. Very early on, we're going for a walk and we went along, I think we got onto an old railway track and then we started talking more. And he said, no, I'm going to get off this. We're on a story track. You're just going to talk, like we're doing here, get off the story. Just look at those individual bits. And those individual moments are not, they're not normative. They don't come with that value. Yeah. So I think that we can, it's a bit like you say with inspiration. Yeah, this quote from Gramsci Coleridge has inspired me. It's there. It's a little gift for you, isn't it? These moments are little gifts for you to put together in how you want to do it. Not that you have to. I would hate it if people felt they had to follow the thread of what this podcast is about, say what else is all about, and say, I need to understand what this thing is, because it's not linear.
And that's the benefit.
A sense of it that they can grasp and take into
the conversational style is really, a good conversation is one that you don't predict and you can't manage. Yeah. And a couple of things struck me when you were talking then about the word that comes. I mean, I agree. I've sat in meetings and information sessions where people from funding organisations said, we want novelty. We get bored of reading the same things all the time. And you're always being asked to do the new. Come up with something new. Come up with a new way of doing this. It's like, and the word that maybe I'm becoming a bit more kind of a small c conservative in my thinking these days. But cultural stewardship seems to be something which we're less focused on these days. And as you say, you can have the big monumental forms of our culture, but there are also those small informal moments that kind of easily come and go, that and it's about an ecological multi-dimensional approach is one that recognizes that there's all these other different things happening at the same time, and they have to be interacting you're looking for the way in which they balance as a it's not a close. I don't like systems thinking. I'm never one for thinking people who it's a bit kind of change the system. If we change the system and the inputs and outputs a bit too, as a metaphor, it's like kind of changing the circuit board. It's a bit too predictive for me. That social systems can be changed like that, whereas with a more kind of ecological style approach, there's things that come, there's things that go, there's seasons, there's other things that there's predators and there's prey. It's like the model is a bit richer than simply thinking of it in terms of a mechanical process or a system. And so that kind of that taking away that thinking within our funding organisations and our social policy development would be. I think we need to send people from the Arts Council to to say rediscover what this is about.
Yeah. I mean, it is very much ecology is what you say. So as systems thinking is it's only effective if it's ecological thinking. And I suppose this is again what I was saying about this being. They're just little gifts that you strew along the way. And I think every moment is a gift to being alive. We never asked to be alive. I don't know about you. It's like, here it is. So I get these amazing gifts, and then what do I do with them? I can, I have the potential to share them with people. And I don't share them because you ought to be like this. I share maybe this quote from Cramsat meant something for me. I don't expect it to be there for you because you weren't sitting in that chair. You weren't me at that time. But the new is it's new for them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and putting aside
that newness, that experience is just what life's all about, isn't it?
And putting aside the tyranny of scale, that's the one that how are you going to scale this up? How are you going to turn this into a mass? No, it's not about that. It's if it's one person at a time, then that's the social benefit for it. And art should be judged on those terms. That if one person stands in front of a painting, or one person at a concert, or one person in a knitting group, whatever the form of art is, if they are transformed by it and they experience something which inspires them, then that is where the value is, rather than being something that can be rolled out for millions of people to all follow mindlessly.
Well, if it's being followed mindlessly, then it's a waste of time, isn't it? Because it's assuming that everybody's the same, and I'm saying assuming that everybody's different. But there are things that are the same about us. So it has the potential to be rolled out. I mean, it has a potential to be scaled up because it's the same thing at different scale. But the only way you can scale it up is you scale it up with individuals who are active, that you do it on a personal level. But I do think there's that sense of sustainability. If somebody, I mean, to me, going on that journey and say, no, I'm going to be my own guide, okay. Yeah. And then I can meet people along the way and they can be their own guide too. And then, but also we can support each other along the way. So it has a natural scale to it. You should scale up. So I'm, at the moment, right the other day, at the moment, effectively arts and development is really a guy going for a walk, okay. But it's me trying to take my 40 years of experience and make it available to people. That's this big anthology, the stuff that I've shared with you. I think it's online. It's like, here are some moments from my walks that might be useful to you. Here's a 3-dimensional perspective on life that you can walk through and some tools. Let me get it out to you and see what people make of it. And so at the moment, it's that and some fantastic people that I've worked with that are working. There's an artist in particular who's helping me design some fantastic scenes and tools, which I think are going to be great to help to it. But I really need people to come out and try and make it work in their own life, but also see how it can work with those around us and develop, a kind of an development of walking practice within a group and obviously within a network. Because to me, it's exactly the same process. You're not having to repeat it and say, well, how does it work then? Well, no, just what works for me happens within an organization, happens, and it's scaled up, and therefore there are more problems and institutional things and dependencies that create along it. So it needs more passing of more inspiration going into that system to work. But it's exactly the same process. So we should be able to do that. We should be able to say, there is value to what we do. We know there's value to what we do. I think we although we struggle to have the language, but we struggle if we try and describe it in terms of our towers, right? That if we all say, well, actually, no, I am on these paths that I've travelled. Why should I try to describe what I do in terms as if I was going to be the most famous and the rich and blah, blah, blah? It's not what I'm looking for. It's not what it is. So how we do things really matters too. And if we can impinge those values into how we do stuff individually and collectively, there's no reason why it shouldn't. But I couldn't write a funding bill and say, I will, because that's nonsense. Total nonsense.
Where would you want people to come and find out more about you?
They pick up the phone. They can email me. I don't do social media and that kind of stuff. I've stopped doing all of that, part of this kind of personal journey. But I do have a website that you can put a link on and people can book a walk on direct from that. I'd love to meet anybody who's in development who wants to explore, how we can walk alongside each other. I'd love to have people that would help me in my journey, and nothing I would pick, would please me more than to think my experience has been useful for somebody else, that they can take it and make it use to them. So perhaps there's something we can do together through the network to do that. But certainly my contact details are on my little website. That might be a start point.
And the website is artsindevelopment.org.uk.
Right, so, yeah.
Wonderful. It's been fantastic talk. You've been listening to the ArtWorks Alliance podcast. Find out more at artworksalliance.uk.